Hello and welcome. As a candidate, he promised to hit the ground running, and it appears that US President Barack Obama has certainly packed more into his first 100 days in office than most of his predecessors. While his number one priority has been the economic crisis, Mr. Obama has also worked to undo most of what former President George W. Bush set in motion. Within hours of his inauguration, he ordered the detention facility in Guantanamo Bay to be closed by next year. And in the past 2 months, he announced a timetable for troop withdrawal from Iraq, banned torture interrogations, sent a videotaped message to the Iranian people, and visited Turkey, his first trip to an Islamic country and seen as sending a positive message to the Muslim world. So today we ask, how do you rate President Obama's performance on the job? Is he steering America in the right direction? And is he improving its image around the world? Remember, you can join the conversation with your questions and comments. Log on to livestation.com/AJE and join the chat room to take part. We'll be also taking a poll in that chat room shortly, and we welcome your phone calls on the show. But joining me today is Flint Everett, who's a senior Middle East analyst in the White House before, and the State Department and CIA before leaving the Bush administration in 2003 over disagreements on Middle East policy and the so-called War on Terror, a term which notably has been dropped by the Obama administration. Flint's currently the Director of Geopolitics of Energy Initiative at the New America Foundation here in Washington, D.C. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. Well, the economy, of course, is a big story for most people on the home front, of course, but let's start off looking at the two wars that America's waging simultaneously. Do you believe that President Obama's plan to withdraw troops from Iraq is going to pan out? Is he going to be able to do it?
You know, he has set some very clear benchmarks, and while he allows some flexibility in the time frame, he seems pretty clearly committed to getting to a much lower level of military force within a finite period of time. And obviously what's going to determine whether he gets there or not is conditions on the ground. My sense, though, is that he is not really invested in making Iraq a raving success. He would like to be able to get out, leave a not terrible situation behind, and as long as he thinks he has a shot at doing that, I think he's going to stay on the course where he is. He's not going to be devoting a lot of attention or energy at the presidential level to internal Iraqi developments. It's basically, is it safe enough that we can continue to withdraw U.S. forces? That's going to be the policy for the next 18 to 24 months.
But he has been quite insightful in realizing that Afghanistan and now the Pakistan border with Afghanistan is an area of serious concern. Do you think the idea of a surge in Afghanistan will work? Everyone raved about the surge working in Iraq, but would it work in Afghanistan?
Well, I have serious doubts about whether he has in fact really laid out a strategy for Afghanistan and Pakistan, or rather if he's rather simply, made some very high-profile rhetorical statements. If you look at the policy in terms of, actual commitments of resources, it's really questionable whether the kinds of additional troop increments he's talking about can really make a decisive difference on the ground. If you look at funding, he wants to put in $1.5 billion per year for 5 years. If you do the math, the Bush administration put in $1.6 billion per year into Afghanistan during its tenure. So it's not really clear what he is doing in terms of actual resources that's fundamentally different or larger. Then you also get to the question of, well, whatever resources he puts in, what is he trying to do there?
Right.
And how's he going to get there? And I think at this point, the strategy is really most generously described as vague.
Well, interestingly enough, we had a number of emails. A lot, by the way, a huge favorable response for the first 100 days from our viewers. But just to touch on this area that we've been discussing, one from Tom Miller, a viewer by the name of Tom Miller, sent in an email that says, President Obama's Achilles heel is his expansion of the war in Afghanistan and Pakistan, particularly with respect to the northwest tribal areas of Pakistan, where some 4 million Pashtun live. The indiscriminate bombing of these areas by the United States and the Pakistani military at the request of the US has inflamed the population against the United States, turning them towards radical Muslim elements. It would be much better for the United States to, quote, bomb this area with grain and aid. Now, hearts and minds, could that work then?
I think there's a limit, frankly, to what hearts and minds can do for you in this kind of situation. This is a fundamental dilemma that the U.S. faces in this situation. The Bush administration faced it, didn't really resolve it, and I don't think the Obama administration resolved it yet. the hard reality of the matter is that if we were able to get the Pakistani military to do the things that we want them to do to help us curb the terrorist threat in these Pashtun areas, they would inevitably be running up against very deeply ingrained sentiments in the Pakistani population. And on the one hand, we want democracy, we want a representative government, but then when that puts the military in a position where it really can't do some of the things we want them to do without really running up against popular sentiment, we then say, well, why isn't the military performing? It's a fundamental trade-off that has to be faced by any American policymaker. And frankly, I don't think either the Bush administration or now the Obama administration has really faced up to that.
On a similar note, from a viewer by the name of Riz Khan in Pakistan, an email came in saying, Obama needs to focus on economic empowerment of the Afghans rather than send troops to contain them. If he manages to succeed in Afghanistan, he would be treated like the greatest hero ever. Of course, Afghanistan is such a dilemma, as we've known. Every country who's gone in there has realized. Can President Obama, can the US government afford to continue spending the way they are on Iraq and, of course, Afghanistan?
Resources are inevitably going to be a big constraint on whatever we do in this area and in a lot of other areas. For all that the Obama administration seems prepared to print as much money as it needs to carry out its economic initiatives, there is in the end a limit, and politically, in the end, things like foreign aid, reconstruction assistance for Afghanistan, there's going to be a finite amount of political support in the United States for that.
And the US public support, presumably, as well. They don't want the money spent overseas.
Exactly.
We've got a caller on the line from Paris. Anwar, good to have you with us. What would you like to ask?
Thank you, Riz. I would like to ask your guest what he thinks about that. It seems to us President Bush, quite honestly, President Bush brought shame to USA and some of his colleagues to the United States. On the contrary, President Obama, in his first 100 days, it seems to us he can bring fame for the United States because he respects the international community, and his policy seems to us that he's doing his best to the right direction. What do you think about that? Thank you.
Is he going to rebuild the image of America?
Look, I think just his election was an enormous boost to the image of the United States. And if you combine who he is and what he represents in terms of the evolution of American society, and you combine that with this obvious gift for rhetoric that inspires and engages people, he's clearly a public diplomacy plus for the United States. And we see that in myriad ways around the world. But in the end, that kind of public diplomacy will only get you so far. And in the end, the United States is going to be judged within the tenure of his presidency by people around the world on the basis of policies and whether they're effective.
Interestingly enough, President Obama has said he doesn't want to look back and sort of prosecute or sort of pursue legally the former administration officials who were involved in, for example, the torture memos that were released and other abuses. Do you feel that was a good decision? I mean, don't people want accountability?
As an American, I certainly do. And personally, I'm disappointed that he's not going further in actually trying to provide an accounting of what happened. And while I'm certainly glad he has rescinded the executive orders that authorized these kinds of techniques, the hard reality is that if that's all he does, another president could come in after him, reinstate the executive orders, and the United States would unfortunately be back in the torture business.
That's what I wondered, whether anyone believed that torture was going to end or harsh techniques are going to end, for good.
I think he still has an opportunity, if he really wants to deal with this issue head on, to put the United States in a fundamentally better place than it is right now in terms of the way it's perceived around the world. And frankly, as an American, I think it would be a good thing if he took more definitive steps you'll never make it absolutely impossible for the United States and its personnel to do some bad things, but he could put in place measures that would make it more difficult.
Now, Flynn, of course, you know the system very well here in DC, having worked across the board, and took a stand on principle because you didn't agree with some of the things that were being done. Now, of course, Guantanamo Bay was very controversial. It seems symbolically it represents far more than anything else. And his decision to announce the closure of Guantanamo early on was probably obviously a good thing for people around the world. Do you think realistically it's going to make as much difference when it comes down to it?
Again, that's going to be an area where he said the right things. He said we should close Guantanamo Bay. He set a deadline for that. All of that is great. But now he's got to carry through, and they have some real challenges in implementing. There are a number of people in Guantanamo Bay that for various reasons the U.S. government thinks it can't just send back to their countries of origin. And where are you going to find places for these people? And a year from now, are we going to be creating a kind of smaller version of Guantanamo in Kansas or someplace else? I mean, I certainly hope not. But he has some real challenges in front of him in following through on the rhetorical commitments he's made.
Of course, 100 days is not a long time. We're going to discuss more about what's been going on. We're going to take a short break here. When we get back, we'll discuss more of that. Now, quick poll in our chat room. The question today is, what overall grade would you give President Barack Obama's job performance over the past 100 days? Go into the chat room and take part in that poll. And as we remind you, you can also join the conversation with your questions and comments if you go to livestation.com and take part with the debate that you can see going on there now. More of our discussion in a moment.